Hey, it's me, Shannon. Welcome to part 21 of Was I in a Cult? Quick recap. So, yesterday I talked about how I got baptized after I finished the Foundations of Faith class. Now, I don't remember much about the Foundations of Faith class other than one scripture and the testimony of the leader. That's like all I remember. I think the theme of the class was spiritual warfare, like any other Pentecostal church you would ever go to. At the time, I didn't know much about different denominations within the church, although I knew that a lot of people were saying that we were Pentecostal and others were saying we're non-denominational, and then others were saying, well, like our pastor is like an apostle. Like they were likening our pastor as to like the apostle Paul in the Bible, because like he went to strengthen other churches around the world and that he planted. And so all of a sudden we were like apostolic also, which to me, when I look back, I don't even think that's really what that meant, like an apostolic church, because you have a pastor that's an apostle. I don't think that's what that means. I'm not sure. I don't remember. But in our church, most of the leaders and pastors didn't have like a theological degree anyways. So they were just kind of like making things up along the way, and sort of like just piecing things together here and there. And sometimes, I don't know, I just think that a lot of times it was more about the whole vision of the church and what we were doing as a ministry, and less about, us having a personal relationship with God. It was more about us getting the vision, internalizing the vision. There's even a book about it. And it was really pushed that we should read these books that was written by this main pastor that founded this church. So when I first came into any sort of discipleship, like that level 1 or whatever, like we were supposed to be reading one of the first books that was put out by our pastor. And so of course, like, we all had to buy the book, right? And then read the book. I don't know if that was part of that curriculum or that was part of just the other discipleships, because that was just one of the classes that I was taking. But we were also going to these like women's discipleships and regional discipleships, where at the time I remember a bunch of us would get in a bus and we would all go to another church, right? Because sometimes the regional events were being held at this other church, and they were hosting like all the women from within that region. So like if you had like our city and then all the cities around within maybe a 20-mile radius or whatever, all of those women from those churches were going to meet up at this other church to have this discipleship thing, right? And through there they taught us, like, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to like really give away what ministry it was, but you know how like there's like the 3 C's and the 5 E's and things like that? Well, like that was like they had certain, what do you call it? Like acronyms, right? That stood for something. Like E was evangelism, like so anyways, we had like the 5 E's and the 3 C's, and our mission statement. And and that was a big thing, is that we were to learn our mission statement by heart. We were never really asked to memorize scripture, but we were told we all had to memorize the mission statement of the church. Actually, scratch what I just said, because we were supposed to memorize 2 scriptures that were given to our pastor when this ministry was founded. And those two scriptures were supposed to be scriptures we knew by heart, we could quote instantly. We were tested on it. Like, we would go to class and they'd be like, who remembered the scripture? And then they would ask someone to stand and say the scripture. There was two scriptures that the whole ministry was apparently founded on, and that was given to the pastor one day when he was praying. And so those two scriptures were very important to us that we needed to learn, and we needed to know the mission statement by heart and be able to just quote it. And so that was like one of the things that we had to do in those classes. I will say, I think we were told to read the books that were written by the pastor a little bit more than we were told to read the Bible. Especially if you were new. Like, if you were new, the first thing you needed to do was read his book. And it's like, I was just so into the Bible that I was like, I don't have time to read the book. I'm trying to learn all I can read about, God and Jesus, you know what I mean? And like, later on I'll read about our pastor. But it was pushed constantly, about getting the book, reading the book, and internalizing that vision. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to, have a vision, because obviously there's a scripture that says we should have the vision. I don't think it's bad to write a book either. It's just where it draws the line is when the importance of that book and, everything about that vision, about what us as a church is doing, like, sometimes it becomes a little extreme to the point of taking away from your own personal relationship with God, and it becomes just about the pastor instead of just about Jesus. I mean, when you go to church every Sunday, is it always about the pastor? Is it always about the vision? Is it always about what your church is doing? I mean, it can be like that sometimes, but not every service. I mean, of course, every church has its own calling, its own vision, its own direction that God is sending them. But it doesn't have to be preached about every single week. Now, I will say, I loved the personality of our pastor. I met him, I met his family. All of them are really nice people. And so, honestly, it's even hard sometimes for me to talk about this, because honestly, I don't even know if they have realized what their church has become. And I don't think that they have realized what's going on. But then again, maybe they have, because they've gotten to a place where they've made so much money. And I left for a long time, and I actually went back years later, and I walked in, and I was just like, hadn't seen it from the outside looking in, because I had been away for so long. And then I came back in to visit, right, to see some of my old friends. And when I went there, I was so saddened, because I think like the whole first hour of the service was about giving, and they had like different levels of giving, like you were the gold member or the silver member or the platinum member, and it just didn't feel right. It just felt so wrong. I don't know how to explain it. It felt like there was a rewards program for those who gave the most in the church. And it just felt like a business, like an organization. It didn't feel like a church anymore. And then I looked back and I was like, did it ever? The tactics are just more blatant now than they used to be with the way they present it. And what I found over the years is that as the years went by, the pastors and the leaders became a little less approachable, to where they would, leave straight out of the back of the church and then go into the green room, and you would never see them. Like, cars would be pulled behind so that they wouldn't have to like actually engage with the people.